Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran, Mr. Bipin Verma, Mr. Prabhakaran, and Mr. Vishwanathan. Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran needs no introduction. He is a leading authority on tax matters in the country, and especially with relation to GST, etc. Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran has a very impressive resume, but he has requested specifically that the introductions be kept brief. So I will just say that after a career as a lecturer in a college, serving with the government, he established his firm Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan in 1985, and he has developed a very, very successful practice which employs over 350 professionals in the area of tax, international trade, intellectual property, and corporate law. For over 30 years, he has handled several high-profile litigations and has led the firm in representing over 40,000 litigants before the Supreme Court, High Court, and tribunals. It is undoubtedly considered that Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran's word or opinion on tax is the gospel. He will deny it himself, but that is the way the industry and the people associated with him perceive him to be and his opinion to be. He is being assisted today by Mr. Bipin Kumar Verma, the executive partner at Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan. Mr. Bipin heads the customs advisory practice and the tax practice of the firm at Hyderabad. He has worked in multiple tax verticals within the firm during the past 12 years. Mr. Prabhakaran, the partner of the company, heads the indirect tax consulting practice of the firm at Bangalore. He too has worked for more than 13 years with the firm and is involved with multiple tax verticals. The fourth person on the panel today, Mr. Vishwanathan, is a joint partner of the firm, and he has been associated with the firm in Bangalore for more than 5 years and has over a decade of experience in indirect taxation. In keeping with the wishes of Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran, I will stop the introduction at this point, and as he rightly said, let us have a longer knowledge session and less of introductions. So, Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran, thank you very much, sir, for agreeing to be part of this webinar today. We are all looking forward eagerly to your inputs and guidance and advice on various matters. And like Rohit mentioned while we were offline, that questions have already started coming in even before you have started speaking. So that shows the interest all the participants have in what you're going to tell us today and what you're going to share with us. Over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jagdeep. And thanks to all of you who decided to spend the next 1.5 hours with us. I know your time is very precious, and whatever time you spend with us will be productive and useful. Today, our team and myself would be talking about GST. Before we get into the slides and then discussions, I just wanted to give a very broad overview of the importance of compliance and taking advantage of the GST. I must confess that I never imagined that in my lifetime I will see a day where taxes paid in Maharashtra is available as a credit in Karnataka or in Gujarat. We have more than 29 states and union territories, but since our taxation system, whether it's excise or VAT, they are all origin-based taxation, the consumption was not looked into that carefully. In order to develop the GST across the India, the most important thing is any tax paid under the GST in one state must be available as a credit in another state wherever the further supplies take over. This, I would say, is the most important aspect of the GST. And for this alone, the people who are the architects of the implementation of this GST must be given full credit. This alone can avoid the cascading effect of taxes on taxes on taxes. This is the only way we could be transparent as far as the indirect taxes paid on the goods and services which are due to the manufacturer of the finished goods or services which are exported. So that we export goods and we don't export services, taxes. While this is the most important aspect of the GST, that is granting credit. If you have paid 1 rupee on the inputs, I'll give you 1 rupee here. This is the sheet anchor of the GST as a scheme. When it is being implemented in the form of legislation, whether it is central GST or state GST or IGST and so on, we have made certain legislations which will make it difficult for a common man to understand. Unfortunately, the taxation laws, whether it is income tax or GST, these laws are meant for a common man to understand and implement and comply with the law. But it is difficult for them to understand. They need certain clarity or clarification to understand the nuances of this law. When I say nuances of the law, what does it mean? In any tax law, you need to know answers for a few questions. First, what is the taxation event? 2, on what you have to pay tax? 3, to whom I should pay the tax? 4, how much should I pay tax? 5, when should I pay the tax? And last, how do I pay the tax? If you can find the answers for these questions correctly, you have mastered this law. But if you did not know the answer, even any one of them, you are in deep trouble. And in finding the answers for these 6 questions, when I look at the provisions of the GST law, I must confess, there are times when I get answers which are diametrically opposite. Both of them appear to be correct. And that is one of the dilemma. And with all modesty at my command, after spending more than 45 years in taxation, if this is the position in which I am placed in interpreting the law, I can very well imagine a common man who does not have the background of interpretation. This law interpretation will call for careful reading of the words, sentences, punctuations used in a particular section, and you should be able to combine that section with so many other sections to get the complete 360 degrees view of the situation. If you miss anyone, there can be serious problems. While I am saying this, why am I saying that there are serious problems in the understanding of the drafting of the legislation is the laudable objective of granting the credit of the taxes paid on one state in another state or in the same state. They have also been creating roadblocks. Under these circumstances, I will not give the credit. In these circumstances, I will lower the tax, but you should not take the credit on inputs or input services. Well, I granting the refund, I will give you for this, I will not give for this. So these types of ifs and buts and blocking of the credit chain puts the enormous burden on the downstream product manufacturers as also the distributors and dealers. And this creates a complication. And we will develop, or at least we will talk about these nuances in the way in which I intend to proceed. I was told by your association that you would like to know what are the recent developments after the COVID-19. I thought it's a good idea, but I thought I will give what I understand about the rubber industry and how to fix the rates of taxes for various products and services rendered by you. And that's very, very important. If you don't know the correct rate of tax and the value, you will never know how much to pay. And having known what is how much to pay, you must also know how much credit you can take for that. What is the amount you have to pay from your pocket? I will be dealing today, because for want of time, I will be dealing on the classification of products in some detail. I won't be dealing with the credit mechanism. However, when my colleagues are going to talk about the impact on COVID-19 situation and the GST changes made, or when they are going to discuss about the refund provisions, I will interject and elaborate those portions on the credit portion. As a lawyer, I would also be touching upon some of the recent judgments of the courts, which are something controversial. Some of them are correct, some of them may not be correct. And I will do some comments on that. This is my tentative agenda for today. I hope I will be able to complete what I wanted to do today. Very ambitious because time is short, the subject is big. And let me see what I can do the best under this game. Rubber industry, I'm carrying coal to Newcastle. All of you are part and parcel of the rubber industry. India is the largest, sixth largest producer of natural rubber. Some people say 5, some people say 6, etc. We must also know that we account for about more than 70% of the sheet rubber, block rubber and latex. We have perhaps one of the largest rubber growers. We have so many workers, more than 0.6 million workers in the rubber implantation. Kerala is the top state where the rubber is grown in a big way. And we are also the second largest in the world consumer of natural rubber. This is one of the statistics taken from the industry. Now, when you look at the segmentation of the industry, I would say large scale, medium and small. I can also add micro. When you look at the products that are being used in various markets or the industries, of course, the top automotive tires and tubes will come first. Footwear, sole and cycle tires and tubes. Somewhere pharma medical goods are also covered. Rubber hoses, foams, latex foam, belt and belting, sheetings. All these products are basically the different forms of rubber products which are being sold in the market, either for original equipment or for replacement or otherwise as consumer goods. When I say classification of the goods and the rate of taxes, when a taxation legislation fixes different rates of taxes, then the dispute on the correct classification of the product is always a challenge. When we have a tax rate of 5%, 12%, 18, 28, plus cess, plus this, etc., you are going to have a problem. Wherever the goods are not getting classified under different heading schedules, there is a residuary entry called entry for 453 of the schedule, which will attract 18%. So therefore, any product which is any rubber product for that matter, which is not classified in any other schedule will come to 18%. But most important thing is, under the GST, the goods are to be classified by the tariff entry, which is specific description for the goods. Somewhere in the big long notification called 1/2017, which gives several shading, etc., etc., there is a small footnote as an explanation, which will say, what do you mean with tariff item, heading or subheading and chapters? And it will also say that the rules of interpretation of the first schedule of the Custom Tariff Act, including the section, chapter notes, and general explanatory notes, shall apply to the interpretation of this notification. This is a small sentence written at the end of the notification. Sometimes by the time you read the notification running several pages, you get tired. You may not even look at the last sentence in the particular notification. And this is a killer. It means by this one particular explanation, the entire principles of interpretation of the custom tariff of the goods that are being imported in India are fully borrowed, and they will be applied fully to determine the classification of products under the GST law. Now, custom tariff itself is based on harmonized system of nomenclature called HSN, and at the HSN level, it is 6-digit classification, and India adopted 6 plus 2 more, it is 8-digit classification for the customs, and the same is being applied on the GST. So therefore, to understand the scope of a particular entry in the schedule to the GST, you must look into the corresponding scope of the goods under the Custom Tariff Act, read with the section note, chapter notes, as also the interpretive rules, and fix the correct classification under the custom tariff, and then come back to GST and then say, I'm here in Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 or Schedule 3. So therefore, it is necessary for you to hop from GST to the customs and hop back from custom to the GST. I think the legislation has made all of us fit, because we have to hop every day from one tariff to another to back. Now, in the interpretation of the HSN itself, there are several controversies, several gray areas. World Customs Organization has published explanatory notes to understand the scope of each of those tariff items. Those these explanatory notes, they are themselves not binding in nature, but definitely provide useful guidance for classifying the goods. And those rules are fully followed as far as the custom tariff, which will apply mutatis mutandis to the GST tariff here. So now you have a chapter, a heading, next. A chapter, a heading, a subheading, and tariff code item. And you have several rules of interpretation given under the rules of interpretation. I am not going to read each of those rules. This is not a class for classification purposes. I am only giving you an overall bird's eye view. Therefore, I am not going to read these rules extensively, but when I go to deal with some controversial decisions, then I'll get back to the rules and then draw your attention. That is how I intend to proceed. What are the principles involved in the classification? What does the court say? You will find the judgments will say, you must go by the trade parlance. How a common man understand a particular product? There are judgments to this effect by the Supreme Court. There are judgments of the Supreme Court which will say, we must understand the meaning of the word of the tariff by the way in which the concerned trade is doing. Then there are judgments which will say that if the item in question is scientific in nature, you must look at scientific and technical meanings also. So you already have 3 or 4 principles already stated. Sometimes the court judgments will say end use of the product is irrelevant. There will be another judgment which will say end use makes it very clear that product is classified here. There are judgments which will say what are the type of goods or the status of the goods at the time of importation or at the time of removal from your factory is relevant. There will be situations with an exception to this rule. If you have separate line item in a particular invoice, is it good enough to say that the goods are different? Answer is not necessary. Can the classification determined by an exemption notification determine the correct classification? Answer is no. So now, what am I saying? If these are the principles of classification, and these principles stated by the Supreme Court and other various tribunals and the high courts are talking different languages, how are you going to reconcile them? You as industry leaders producing different products of rubber industry, which principle you will follow? This is apart from the classification of the goods given in the tariff. These are called principles given by the courts, apart from what is interpreted rules, section note, chapter notes. So therefore, we have in our office sat down, discussed, under what circumstances these products classification will apply this principle. And that is what the most important takeaway for today's sessions. While so many principles are being floated around, all stated by the courts of India, which one will you follow? For that, you need to dive deep and say, for these circumstances, this principle will apply. For the following circumstances, something else will apply. And you should be in a position to categorize and apply those decisions for different types of situations. And that is the skill which you need to imbibe and acquire. And that is not easy. You are most likely to be carried away, this item should be like this. For example, if an tariff item says ice cream, then what will you put? Ice cream. What should be the classification for this? What principle will follow? Ice cream is everybody can understand. I buy ice cream and eat. It should be softy, it could be any other type of scoop, etc., etc. Now, a question came with the Supreme Court where McDonald's was selling those soft serve. They could not market it as an ice cream because the milk fat content was lower than 12%, unless it is more than 12%, it cannot be marketed as a ice cream under the PFA. And this rule applies all over the world. So they could not market the product as ice cream, but they sell the soft serve. When the question came to the Supreme Court, whether it's ice cream or not, the department wanted to classify them as ice cream. A technical meaning was given, sir, this is not an ice cream. Why? Because milk fat content is less than percentage, which is fixed under the PFA, therefore. The court said, no, Mr. Lakshmi Kumar. Yesterday I went along with my family for an ice cream. I asked him ice cream, he gave me software, I took. A common man does not distinguish between a soft serve ice cream, milk fat content more, less, etc., etc. So therefore, I will apply common man test. I am just giving an example. If I had to give examples of this nature, we can go on for days together, weeks together. But I wanted to give you a heads up that these are the types of products which may come. Apart from all those complications, India also brought in a concept called the composite supply of goods and services, mixed supply of goods and services, and independent supply of goods and services. What are these three items called? And this is the most important thing for you to know, because quite a few times you may be supplying the goods in one form or other, and if the combination of the goods will come under the category of composite or mixed or independent supply, then you may get into a problem of rate which you never imagined. I did have an occasion where a client came to me almost after about a year or so of implementation of GST. He was discussing with me some credit scheme, etc., etc. Incidentally, I asked him what about the classification of the product. He said, no problem, sir. We are all perfect. We have classified them correctly. I said, very good. Then when I was examining the credit scheme, I found that the rate applied by them on a particular product appeared to be incorrect. So I asked him again, sir, you said that the classification was correctly done, etc. I would like to look into that. He said, by all means, Lakshmi Kumar, we would like to go by, because our consultant has said this is the correct classification I've done. And he was paying 5% tax. When I examined, I found the rate is not 5. He said, is it 12, sir? I said, no. Is it 18? I said, no. Is it 28? Maybe yes, plus some cess. I mean, his heart stopped for a moment. Why? Because by applying the principles, some of the most important principles were forgotten or not seen. I can't blame him. I can't blame the consultant, because you have to dive deep. And that is what is important for the whole industry. Just imagine, genuinely, if you committed a mistake and paid the taxes lower than what is currently payable, 3 years down the line, because they have the time to file, come and tax the tax demand for 3 years from the last date when which you have filed the return. For 17, 18, 19, you filed the return now. 3 years from now, you have got. So 6 years down the line, they are coming and asking you that you have paid 5% wrongly, you ought to pay 18% if they say. 13% you have to pay back along with interest for the 6 years. Along with, they may also impose some penalty for being wrong. Today morning we saw some news item where the hand sanitizers were wrongly classified by a particular industry. Even though they paid the taxes, the department went ahead with arresting the people and all this thing. I am not saying who is right, who is wrong, but the consequences seem to be disastrous. So that is why I thought I should spend some time in emphasizing the need for understanding the rate of tax properly. after listening to my session here, in case you wanted to have one more session exclusively only for credit scheme under the ITC, under the GST, we could organize something. At least we could flag the issues which you should be aware of. Because you are not working with a margin of 30%, 40% markup and all those things. You are in a competitive world. Your competitors are selling at a price which is lower than you. You are also looking at how to decrease the cost of production and apply the correct rate. And in the process, suddenly if you are getting a demand for 13% or more than that for 3, say 5 years, etc., with interest and other things, I think no customer is going to pay you back. It has to pay from your pocket. It could be suicidal. Therefore, I am emphasizing on this. I do not know whether you are expecting this today, but I thought it was my duty to point out to you. That is why I am talking about this. We have brought in a concept called a composite supply. When two or more taxable supplies are naturally bundled and supplied in conjunction with each other in the ordinary course of business, then whatever is the principal supply will be the rate for the whole supply itself. So, to understand, whenever you are going to send or sell bundled goods with a single price, then you have to ask yourself a question whether it is a natural bundling or unnatural bundling. How will and what are the tests we adopted for saying this bundling is natural or not natural? What are the tests? They are conspicuously absent. You must understand from the words used in the statute. We spent hours and hours discussing with our own partners and associates what could be the criteria to be adopted for composite supply. As against that, there is another concept called mixed supply. It says when two or more individual supplies are made in conjunction with each other by a taxable person for a single price, and where the such supply does not constitute composite supply. That means the bundling is not natural. In which case, what will be the rate? The rate will be in the bundle, which is the highest rate that will apply to the whole. It's a punishment. Will you say, when you sell a toothpaste, if you give a toothbrush and put a single bundle and say this is the price, 100 rupees for the both put together, would you say it is a composite supply or a mixed supply? The question is it always necessary for the trade to sell the toothpaste and toothbrush together? Some people may say yes, sir. Why? Because every day morning when you go and brush your teeth, you are applying a toothpaste onto the brush and then you are brushing. It is not talking about the usage, that they are definitely like husband and wife. The toothpaste and the toothbrush must be used together. But is it supplied together? Not necessarily. It is, you can buy the toothpaste separately, you buy the brush separately. It is not usual for the industry to supply both them together. Therefore, the bundling is not natural, though use is bundled. But the entry does not talk about the use, but the supply. So that type of minute detail you have to get in to understand the concept. Just see the contrast. In the case of the composite supply, the rate will be whatever the principle in that will apply, all will submerge into the principle. In the case of mixed supply, it will be the highest rate. But as against this, it is possible that you can supply independently. Suppose you are selling a car and a refrigerator together. Would you say you are a mixed supply? No, I am actually selling two products. I am giving one price. That doesn't mean I bundle them. I am not bundling, I am still supplying separately. So therefore, the concept of goods, whether they are composite goods or supply goods, is a bigger question. In fact, your own industry, we had a problem where the tire, the tube and the flap are put together and then supplied. Whether this will come under the category of composite supply or mixed supply, or it is independent supply of goods. You ask any number of consultants, you will get different types of opinions. As many consultants you ask, you will get as many opinions as possible. But what is the correct way of looking at things? Is it a composite supply or a mixed supply or individual supply? According to me, the whole thing would be a composite supply, because 95% of the replacement market trade by the tire companies start doing it. Therefore, there is a general market trend in this. So now what really happens therefore is, the rate applicable to the tire will apply to the whole. Otherwise, you would have assessed separately. So I'm just giving an example as to what should be the criteria to be adopted for determining an item is coming under the category of composite supply or mixed supply or independent supply. Next question. You are a tire industry. There are people who are manufacturing thread rubber. The thread rubber is sold. You go to a person with a old tire, a bald tire. You may look at my head, is as bald as that. When the tread is wears out because of the running and the friction, the tire on the road, then normally it is discarded. But in India, we make it work. We have separate industry, very, very robust industry when developed in India, producing thread rubber, and there are lots and lots of mechanics who can do the retreading of the tires. Whether this will amount to this particular activity done by him, is it a service or goods? I'm just giving an example. If you as a customer go to a mechanic or a retread rubber fellow and give your tire to him and ask him to retread and give it to you, he says, please come day after tomorrow, sir, I'll give you the tire retreaded. He gives it. He is working on your product, not his product. That this will qualify as a service. He is servicing your tire to make it a usable tire, and therefore what he is rendering to you is a service. On the contrary, if he bought the old tires from the market and did the retreading it himself and sold the retreaded tires to the customers, then what will happen? Then he has to pay tax as if it is a tire. There is no separate rate for the good tire or a fresh tire or a virgin tire and retreaded tire. Both will attract 28%. Now, activity is the same. Person is the same. Depending upon the activity done by him, whether he is doing it on somebody else's goods or his own goods, the rate of tax varies violently. You can also get into issues like rubber parts of sprinklers, drip irrigation, whether what should be the classification of the goods, etc. There are competing entries as far as these parts are concerned, because once it is sprinkler drip irrigation, then there is an exemption with a lower rate of tax will apply, provided it's falling up to 84. But then you always feel that your potted hoses, etc., which are being used in the drip irrigation must also get the lower rate of tax. Your understanding is genuine. Nothing wrong in that. But there is a big question mark. The lower rated tax will apply if the goods are falling under a particular tariff heading. And if a product is not falling under that particular tariff heading, even though it is understood to be a part of sprinklers or drip irrigation, you will not get the concession. And this is one of the ruling also governed by the advance ruling. So basically, what we are trying to say is these products, what a common man will think, I am entitled for this exemption, it is not necessary that all of you are correct. You require a deeper understanding of the entire law as a whole to determine the correct classification. Same will be the question regarding the cycle rickshaw, three-wheeled power, etc., etc. I am not going to deal with in great detail. We can take on the question, make question as a session. One of the raging component problems which is going on is classification of products under motor vehicle parts. In India, we create problems. We don't solve. Once we create the problem, it goes on till about next 10-15 years to solve by the Supreme Court. We have created a problem called motor vehicle parts according to the Indian tariff is attract 28% as if it is an item of not common use. So therefore, all motor vehicle component will attract 28%. Rubber products, most of them will come at 18%. But quite a few of them are used actually in motor vehicle parts. The revenue will contend that it is falling under Chapter 87 so that we can attract 28%. I have seen those classifications disproved. Some of them are absolutely wrong. What the department is trying to do is absolutely wrong. But today, if you go to the advanced ruling, you also get negative rulings. You go for the assessments. He passes the same order falling as a motor vehicle part. But your classification is right. If you succumb to that 28%, you become uncompetitive because your competitors are paying lower. I am saying these anomalies and ambiguities make this law implementation more and more difficult. I don't want you to think that I am painting a very bad picture of the entire legislation. I am not saying that. All I am saying is that this legislation has a lot of booby traps, hidden landmines. If you step on those landmines wrongly, you can be blown up. All I am saying is only that. With all sincerity at my command, I would say, please go back and check up whether your products are being correctly classified and correct rate of tax is being applied. The one exercise I think you should do is the most important takeaway for today's session. As I said, I am not going to deal with valuation. It's a big subject by itself. And input tax credit scheme itself is a very big subject by itself. These are three important things. Apart from your anti-profiting law, which has been enacted as part of this system, and a host of other items, export, what does it mean, when does we say export, intermediate services. We have deviated from international norms several times in several places. We have treated what is export as domestic, and in whatever way the legislation wanted to give the benefit by queer interpretation, the department may also say, no, you are not entitled to. According to me, the battle has not started. Last 3 years, the entire emphasis of the industry was somehow or other file a return. And because of technical glitches, software being not ready from the government side and your side, the decision to file the return, annual return, was postponed. That done only this year by end of March. And the department is now going to scrutinize the returns. They are sitting on a huge amount of data. Whatever is filed by you, they have. Whatever you have filed by your return in the income tax return, they can always collate it. What information you have given to the registrar of companies, they can take it up, analyze, and then come with audit notes. The future audit notes of the department is going to be very different from what you got in the past. And there is also a mandatory compliance that all of you must give a GST tax audit. I am sure you have done it. I am sure consultants or accountants have certified it also. But the way the questions are going to come from different angles, whether it is a classification issue, whether it is a taking of the credit, matching of the invoices, or the valuation, these questions will come in a big way in the weeks to come. Because of the COVID, department was also not able to put in all their efforts. Now, once the COVID is over, hopefully it will be over. If not this month, next month. You can expect some intelligent questions from the audit notes. And that is where the real problem may start. I am not a doomsday sayer. I am an eternal optimist. I always value the welfare of my client. I follow one principle, that all my clients would be those taxpayers who will not hesitate to pay the taxes correctly, not 1 rupee less than what is due. At the same time, they should not be paying even 1 rupee more than what is due. You should be on the correct line. You should not try to cut short and use means that are other than legal to get your results, because those results will never be permanent. They are illusory. According to me, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, not any crooked lines. We need to be followers of law. There will be several instances where you are tempted to take a shortcut. My advice to you will be, don't do that. Face it. Face the issues, get it resolved correctly. Get the correct advice, and if you have paid the thing wrongly, don't fight unnecessarily. And if you have paid the thing correctly, don't lose the fight. It is unnecessary not only for you, but for the whole economy itself. With this, I stop now at this point of time, and I'm going to give the mic to my colleagues to talk about recent issues on GST and the COVID-19. As I said, I will interject in between. Over to Bipin. Yes, Bipin. You're able to come online? You're on mute. Bipin Verma.
I'll start, sir.
Okay, start. Prabhakaran. Apart from Cochin, he was in Bangalore office. He's a tremendous lawyer. I learned a lot of things from Prabhakaran.
Sir. Thank you so much, sir, and good afternoon, my friends. When Sir was mentioning the deep dive and then go for the quality check and then think twice before you decide what tax to be paid and all, I was just recollecting, sir, some 40 years back, my father, he used to collect this rubber seed. I don't know whether you have seen or not, because I am from a district, Kerala, Kannur district in hill area. So he used to collect the seed and then he will plant it in one place. And after the plant grows some 6 months, he will replant that into the plains. Why he was done is that because cashew was a little loss at that time, so he cut all the cashew, one part of the hill, and cut all those things, and then replanted this rubber tree. After 4 years, 5 years, it was not growing enough. It was not as thick. Those who are, experienced in the rubber industry, they know that should have a minimum, diameter. Then only you can cut the skin to get the correct latex. He was not getting it. Then he was just talking to the some estate is there nearby. The manager, he was telling that what foolish thing you are doing. These seeds will not give you enough. The plant which give the enough latex. You should have gone for a bud rubber. We call it in our local one bud rubber. So he was telling some quality RR2, RR11, and all those things. Then he found out some nursery. He removed all these trees and then replanted it. So, what I coming to say that when we want to get quality products, we should always look at the quality. Who will be giving the quality products? That also we should see. So I'm just coming from what sir was telling. We are also, all people who are listening to me, also in the industry for so many years. Maybe from the basic level of trading of rubber sheet to the highest level of, the highest quality of rubber products what you are supplying. When you grow your business by technologically evolving yourself, are you also looking at your finance and taxation in that perspective? That is what actually Saurabh bringing into that one. So this I was telling from my experience, how we evolved the rubber plantation in our area and all. Just slowly we learned and then we changed every time, and then we replanted. After 15 years, we'll do a slaughter cut. Everything we'll cut it, and then we replant it. We will not keep it like that. So like that, no, we will be looking at a new dimension into our produce. So having said so, we should also bring to your, Sir brought to you whether you should pay tax. If you have to pay tax, how, on which you should pay tax. What should be the value on which you should pay tax? Up to this area he brought to you. Now I am going to take you through very briefly, because we don't have much time, very briefly, what are all the timeline, because it's already 3 years we have completed. We are not going back and say that on this date you have to file the return, this date you have to pay the tax, this is the return what you have to pay and all. What we want to bring before you is that what are the latest changes, because you are all now, away from, for some period, due to Corona and other things, you are away from all this activity. During this time, government is in support of you. They have extended your time limits in many cases. For example, suppose you have received a notices or a order from the department, or you have to reply to a particular notice which is issued by the department. If that dates fall during this lockdown period, the government has extended. They have issued an ordinance and then extended. All these kind of due dates fall during this lockdown period up to 31st August. This is the first thing you should remember. So you need not worry if a show cause notice or an appeal or any other due date to comply with the department notices fall between the 20th March, that is what the lockdown we started in India, from 28th to 30th August, it is extended now to 31st. Therefore, suppose if you have received a notice on which you have to file a reply on 30th March, your due date will be now shifted to 31st August. So these are all certain things which we are bringing before you to make you aware that what are all the changes happening in the recent past due to the impact of Corona and the lockdown which is happening, and the change in the the procedures and compliances in the legal area. Now, there are other changes also, which the coming slides I'm going to tell. The returns, regularly you have to file your returns. The GSTR 3B we call is the monthly return, and the GSTR 1, all your output returns you have to file, and your annual return also you have to file. The important one is the GSTR 3B, which is a monthly return, based on which you have to pay the tax. So that is how we are getting. Sir has taken you whether you have to pay tax, on which you have to pay tax. Now you have to pay tax. Then what you should do? You will file GSTR 3B. So there was a due date for GSTR 3B. It is usually comes on 20th or 21st. There are different dates have been given. Statutory date has been given on the following month. For example, March is the due date, then April 20th or 21st. Now, because of the lockdown period, many companies could not operate with sufficient employees. This period has been extended. At the same time, government also want to protect their revenue. What they have done, they have given a relief, a small period of relief they have given. They have identified big assessees and smaller assessees. So in case of bigger assessees, that is more than 5 crore assessees, they have identified the specific date for filing the return. When I say specific date, you should also remember that the due date for filing the return has not been changed under the law. For example, March 20th is the due date, but the specific date now, because of the pandemic lockdown, it is fixed to June 24th. So if you are able to file the return on June 24th, then interest for 15 days is waived. And late fee also waived for full. Interest is not waived full, it is only waived for 15 days from March 20th or April 20th. You can see the screen, or May 20th or June 27th. Till the another 15 days, there is no interest will be payable. Thereafterwards, again, the normal interest rate is 18%. There is a reduced interest rate, that is 9%. After 15 days to June 24th, that is the due date for filing. Sorry, specified date for filing. So up to June 24, you can pay 9%. Thereafterwards, if you are not filed and paid the tax, then 18% will be chargeable. This is applicable on people who are above 5 crore. People who are below 5 crore, there is further relaxation or further benefit extended to them. There is no interest up to the specified date. In the earlier case, we have seen only 15 days they have got the benefit. Now here, up to the specified date, you can see for February, the specified date is June 30th. For March, the specified date is July 5th. Therefore, if you are able to file the return for the month of February on June 30th, you should have paid because June 30th is already over. Or March by July 5th, or April on July 9th, May 20th by September, then there will not be any interest up to that date. If it goes beyond the specified date, then you have to pay 9% interest up to September 30th. Even after September 30th, you are not filed the return and paid the tax, then you are liable to pay 18% interest on delay in payment of tax. And in case of smaller assessees that less than 5 crore, no late fee if the return is filed up to the specified date. Please remember that up to the specified date only late fee is waived, not beyond that. If you are not filed now for February, from June 30th onwards, you are required to pay the late fee and interest. Now, GSTR 1 also on the similar line. I'm not going into detail on that one. Let us see on the ITC front. After Corona, after introduction of lockdown, the government has issued some circulars to comply by the industry for the smooth functioning of the industry or the business. So they have prescribed various procedures to be followed if you are opening the office or if you are opening the industry, starting the industry. One such instruction was to provide insurance to the employees. So you are now bound to take an insurance to the employees if you are opening your manufacturing facility or your office facility during this corona period, during this lockdown period. Are you eligible to get the credit of the tax paid on such insurance? Why I am asking this question is that there are some restrictions available under the rule or section, that is specifically section 17.5, for taking credit on certain services availed by the registered person. One such restriction is that health insurance or life insurance taken by the registered person in the name of the employees. It is considered as a personal consumption. So personal consumption under the relevant section is not eligible as credit. Now, because of the Ministry of Home Affairs, MHS instruction, when you are taking the insurance in the name of the employee, in our view, you should be eligible to get this credit. Same way, if you purchase masks, sanitizers, thermometers, these are all the things which is prescribed by the MHA circular and kept in the company for the use of the employees. You should be eligible to get the benefit because all these are purchased or used for your business activity as per the directions issued by the government. So this is the one benefit which you should think about and you should take the credit. Don't miss these credits thinking that these are all personal consumptions. Now, another change in between actually it's happened in February, March time. They have issued one instruction, one notification by which they allowed you to take the credit. When I say this, I have to tell a little background. Very briefly, I will tell a background. While taking the credit, there is a restriction imposed that you cannot avail the credit which is not available in your GSTR 2A. That is, the vendor, if the vendor is not uploaded the information into the common portal, then it will not appear in your GSTR 2A form and you will not be eligible to take the credit. That is the stand of the department or the revenue. To avoid any hassle to the assessees, registered person, probably in respect of MSMEs and all, because they can file the return in quarterly basis. Therefore, whatever first month, whatever you purchased, you might not have been uploaded into the portal. Therefore, you may not be eligible to take the credit. So many people are not able to, missing those credit which is not available in 2A. Therefore, government brought a facility that 10% extra credit you can take, which is not available in 2A, but you should have the proper documentations with you. You should have the invoices, everything with you. Then you can take 10% extra. So that was restricted monthly. That is February 10% extra you can take, March 10% extra you can take. If you have the invoices with you, then you can take the credit. Now, after this pandemic, after the lockdown, this restriction they have removed, monthly restriction they have removed. So you can take the credit, but by end of September, you should satisfy 10 months across the month, 10% across the month. That is, suppose March you may be taking 20%. No problem. April, if you are not taking, then it is satisfied. Because both the month, if you take it into consideration, the average is 10%. So February to September, the average should keep 10% cumulatively. This is the one relaxation they have given. So anybody who is availing this facility of taking 10% extra, which is not available in GSTR 2A, you need not worry about if you have taken more than 10%, you have taken 20% or 30%, you need not worry about that. By September, if you satisfy the total, that is enough. Then, Next, sanitizers and employees, this one I already covered. One question recently, in fact, department itself has raised, because they, one of our, the client, they asked the department, instead of asking us, they went and asked the department, I have purchased all these items, can I treat it as a gift to the employees? So department answered, no, it cannot be considered as a gift. So why the problem? If it is gift, then you cannot retain the credit. If you supply these items, these masks or sanitizers and all these things, if you supply to the employees as gift, then you cannot retain the credit. So this is what I discussed one slide before, that this is actually you are procured for your business activity, therefore you are eligible to take the credit. Now, health insurance also I have covered in my first slide, therefore I am not spending more time on that one. Okay. Now, there is one big issue, the clients are facing, the industry is facing. You would have a lot of stock available with you. These stocks, you have to sell it. So what will happen? The supplier will come and tell you, you dispose of or you sell all these products at a discounted price. So what you will do? Suppose 100 rupees is the cost at which you purchase. You will get a direction from your supplier that you sell it at 80 rupees. I will pay you 20 rupees. So you will sell that goods at a discounted price to your customer at 80 rupees. Now 20 rupees you have to get from your supplier because they have to compensate. Now he will pay you 20 rupees. The question now is that whether this 20 rupees which is received by you will be considered as an additional consideration you have received towards a supply which you made to your customer. We have examined this in detail. And in our view, this need not be, or this cannot be considered as an additional consideration because this is coming as a separate transaction. What you have done first, you agreed with your customer for supplying the goods at 80 rupees. Therefore, that is a transaction. GST tax is paid based on the transaction value which you have agreed between the party. Therefore, you paid the tax on 80 rupees. The 20 rupees what you are getting from the supplier, you should see that you have a proper documentation on that through a commercial invoice or any other documentation which can support having paid that amount. This 20 rupees which he is giving, if he is not issued a GST credit note, if he issue a GST credit note, then you may have some issue on the credit what you have taken initially. You would have taken credit on the 100 rupees. Suppose if you issue this 20 rupees based on a GST credit note, then you will have a problem to take that credit. So you should get this 20 rupees through a commercial credit note so that whatever tax you paid, you can retain the credit. I'm not telling it's an avoidance, it is actually a tax planning. That is what we are advising you. So the question which is raised is that whether this be considered as a consideration received for the first supply to the customer. Our answer is no. It is a separate transaction by which you are getting this 20 rupees. That is be considered as a discount on the original supply transferred to you through a commercial document. Same way, you have different other problems you are facing during Corona. For example, you entered into an agreement for supply. You are unable to supply because of the lockdown. Or you would have agreed with the vendor that you will pick up these many parts. Unfortunately, your manufacturing facility is stopped. So you are unable to do it. Like that, there are number of cases or issues can come up by which your vendor may charge a penalty on you or a liquidated damage on you. So the question now raised is that whether this liquidated damage or this penalty which is raised by your vendor will be considered as a taxable activity under GST. Of course, there is a taxable entry under the law. Agreeing to do an obligation to an act, to do an act. If it fall under that particular category, this will be considered as a taxable activity and tax has to be paid on the amount which you have received, the consideration which you have received for the penalty which you have collected or somebody collected from you, he has to pay because he is receiving the consideration. So we have examined this in detail, whether this forfeiture amount or this penalty amount received can be considered as a taxable activity. So our considered view is that it's a penalty amount. This cannot be considered as a service. It's a disservice actually. We cannot consider it as a service under the act, but it's a disputable position. There are different views taken, but our decision, our view is that this can be considered as only a penalty and not towards providing any service from your point of view. And now, what can be the tax planning you can do in this? The tax planning can be by way of documentation. You should have a proper documentation of receipt of this document. For example, instead of collecting this amount as another income in your books, you can show it as reduction of your original supply. For example, 100 rupees to be paid, you can pay 80 rupees. So reduction in the consideration cannot be considered as receipt of an income. So these are all certain planning you can do because these kind of transactions, instances we are seeing during this period. So you have to be very, very careful when you are receiving these considerations. If you are receiving this consideration as an income, then you may have to pay tax on that income, or you may have to suitably answer why it cannot be considered as an income. So these are all certain issues which we have seen during this period. Now I request Bipin sir to take the remaining part. There are a number of changes happen during this corona period. I request Bipin sir to take care.
Thanks, Prabhakar. Am I audible?
You can increase the volume, sir.
Yeah. So,
Little more.
you all.
Little more. Your voice.
Is the mic
Mike, I think a little more.
closer? Hello.
You're still very feeble, Bipin.
Okay. Hello.
Yes?
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Just carry forward further. Now, we have discussed certain developments which were very recent and which were pertaining to the specific situation which has arisen because of the COVID. But if we talk about developments, GST is synonymous for change if we see the past 3 years. And the model or approach which the government has adopted appears to be the launch the GST and then keep on improving up. We have seen a lot of changes in the act, rules, fresh notifications being issued, continuous circulars, and on top of it, we have seen lots and lots of advanced rulings and then further high court rulings, etc. So therefore, when we are talking about development under GST, development from all fronts. But as of now, for this particular session, we have limited our discussion for developments on the front of refund scenario, which is very crucial here. And I'm given to understand that there are a lot of members who are regular exporters here. As in the beginning, Mr. Lakshman Kumaran said that the crucial aspect is correct identification or quantification of the duty payable. We have to pay the correct duty, but not a penny less and not a penny more. Refund is the scenario here, which under GST has a slight difference from the earlier situation. When I talk about refunds for exporters under GST, under GST, hello,
Yes.
because of network issue, I just switched. Yeah, if I am audible, it's fine. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so under GST, the difference is that in GST scenario, exporters for zero rating could have procured their inputs and services without payment of tax and then can export without payment of tax. Under GST, that option is not there. You have to first pay your taxes, and what is believed is that the credit chain or the credit provisions will take care of entire thing, and the only option with you will be either to claim refund of credit or to pay tax utilizing that credit and take refund. So therefore, for a period, you will be incurring cost by way of payment of taxes on your purchases, and then you will be going for refund. So there is a blockage of working capital from it, and therefore it's very crucial to have timely claim for refund. Government initially thought that the system which they're going to introduce will be such that the refunds will be given very fast, like drawback, etc., as soon as you export. But that system finally could not be launched, and therefore there was for past 2-3 years there were delay in refunds, etc. But on top of it, very recently, government has come out with various amendments which are hitting exporters. It appears that the government's intention here, or that what triggered these amendments, is the fact that there have been in the past certain fraudulent transactions, that is availment of credit fraudulently and then encashing those credits by way of refund. And therefore certain specific amendments have been made, which I'll just try to cover there. I talked that there are two modalities. Either you export on payment of IGST by utilizing credits and then claim refund of that. So far as export of goods is concerned, by virtue of definition, exporting goods is not linked with realization of sale proceeds. Now, with this amendment, export of goods for the purpose of claiming refund, whether refund of credits involved on inputs or refund of IGST paid on final product, will be subject to this condition that the sale proceeds should be realized within the period as specified by FEMA. So this new condition has to be watched out. And this is adversely affecting the position of original planning. If you see the refund provision, section 16 of IGST Act, do not talk about it. There is already a distinction. You all know that export of service, yes, the export itself qualifies only when sale proceeds in foreign exchange are received. But for export of goods, this condition is not there. Now, introducing this condition through rules for the purpose of claim of refunds is something which has to be tested whether it is well within the powers which are coming flowing from the Act itself or not. So, this is one aspect which will be affecting the export of goods scenario. This one. Similarly, there is another change which is pertaining to claim of refunds of ITC, unutilized ITC. Rule 89 otherwise prescribes that whatever is the ITC which is attributable to your export turnover, unutilized, that can be claimed as a refund. Even for the purpose of this thing, the zero rated supply turnover, which is the turnover of exports. Now, with respect to that turnover, another restriction has now been introduced where this zero rated supply turnover will be compared with the value goods supplied or similarly placed suppliers supplying such goods domestically in Indian market, and if the export turnover value is up to 1.5 times, then the export turnover value will be accepted. But if the export turnover value actually exceeds 1.5 times of the similar like goods which are supplied in domestically, and not only by the exporter, it can be by any similarly placed supplier. So if it exceeds, then the value of zero rated supply turnover will be restricted to 1.5 times of that. So this is again a restrictive provision which will be affecting the total quantum of refund, whereas the concept of zero rating otherwise simply says that whatever is the credit attributable to your export product, that should be given as refund. So again, this is one area which is going beyond the prescription of the Act. And this change also has been introduced by way of introduction, a change in the formula under the rule only for calculation of the refund turnover. So these are the two areas where we feel that there is a scope for examining the legality, and wherever it's hitting the exporter's heart, a call has to be taken, maybe through the association or with God, whether to go for any challenge to the provisions or whether to go to the government representing and displaying this particular disparity, basically. Then there is another change which has been brought under refund scenario, which is otherwise not specific to refund scenario, but it is a general thing, which is a sort of plugging of a loophole. The provision now inserted is that refund, if at all because of any excess payment of tax or wrong payment of tax has to be claimed, then the refund will be given in the form in which the tax was paid. That is, if the tax was paid from credit, then the refund will be given by way of credit only. If proportionally some credit account was used, then the proportionate refund will be given through credit only. This was a loophole because people utilized this particular provision earlier for encashing the extra or accumulated credits by going for a provision like where somebody pays wrongly, supposing he has to pay as interest rate supply CGST and SGST, but wrongly he has paid IGST on the transaction, treating that supply as interest rate supply. Then the provision says that he has to pay CGST, SGST afresh, and he can go for refund of the wrongly paid IGST. People consciously did it. They paid CGST, SGST afresh, and then filed refund for IGST. This IGST was paid by utilizing credit only. But under the unamended refund provisions, any excess tax paid, you can seek refund, and the refund was being given in cash. So this particular area has been plugged by making an amendment that refund will be given in proportion to whatever mode the payment was made initially. Then there is, Mr. Prabhakan touched upon another aspect, that there is a provision in the form of Rule 36(4) which actually restricts the credit availment if the credit is not shown in your return 2A. That is the concept of matching with 2A is there, and you can avail only a limited amount in excess of what is appearing in your return 2A. That restriction is there in general, 10% restriction, but with respect to export refunds, when you are claiming refund of unutilized credit, initially through circular it was clarified that this restriction will not apply for refunds of credits, and you can, if you are possessing the invoices, then you can claim refund of that without this restriction. But now through circular again it has been mentioned that even for refunds, only credit which will be allowed is which is reflected in 2A, and not even the benefit of 10%, which is otherwise available for availment of credit, but for the purpose of refund, even this 10% benefit will not be given, and the refund will be restricted to only what is appearing 2A. So this is another area which we need to take note of, which is restricting the refund, some quantification wise. Then there are general, this is what we have discussed already, but certain other compliance requirements have been introduced that you have to mention in your returns, HSN, SSC code for all inward supplies, etc. So this will be creating an additional compliance burden for industry. Next. Another area of refund is an inverted duty structure scenario. You all know, and in our rubber industry also, there are products like attracting 5%, 12% lower rate, and therefore there can be a scenario where it is resulting into inverted duty structure, and the provision allows refund of the excess credit under the inverted duty structure. Originally, and by way of Act itself, it simply said that credit on inputs, input services, etc., will be allowed excess credit on account of inverted duty structure. But then government subsequently came out with an amendment in the rules and in the formula itself. The value of input services for the purpose of computation of this excess credit has been removed, and therefore the credit attributable to input service scenario is not now refunded under the inverted duty structure. This again is an amendment under rules, and this particular provision is also under challenge by way of writ under various high courts. So this is another area to be watched out for. I think there are lots and lots of decisions. I'm just talking about some important decision. There is one area of law which is with respect to delayed payment of taxes. Because of non-filing of returns, there was happening to be delay in payment of filing of return, and consequently the tax was late. There the question came up whether interest liability should come on the gross tax not paid, or should it be only on the net cash payable for it. The provision initially was saying that tax not paid or short paid will attract interest liability. But then GST Council in a meeting took note of the situation and announced that such interest liability should come only on the cash portion of the tax not paid. And if a person is having credit available with him, though he has not filed the return at time, then interest should not accrue. This particular issue also traveled to place because the announcement was made, but the amendment in the provision is still not effective. The amendment has been made, but it has not been made effective. And the question came whether this amendment will be prospective or retrospective. Department started recovery proceedings, treating that as of now there is no amendment, and therefore a lot of recovery proceedings directly in the form of garnishee recovery, that is straight away attaching the bank accounts or asking banks to pay that amount, etc., were reached. This matter also went before high courts, and the final position on this as of now is that one high court has said that even without this amendment, the liability should come only on the cash part only and not on to the extent of credits. Subsequently, GST Council also through a press release has announced that the amendment will be made retrospectively. So therefore, we hope that this will bring an end to this controversy. But till now, the proceedings are being initiated, and therefore people can take note of this thing that high courts have held in such provisions that only on the cash part, and if at all any interest liability has to be determined, it should be first determined by way of issuance of show cause notices and proper adjudication proceedings, and then only recovery proceeding can be initiated, and not the garnishee proceedings directly for recovery of these things. Maybe with this, I think I can, because of the time scenario, maybe If Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran would like to summarize the today's
Yeah.
the
Thank you, Bipin
call
and
so that we can
Prabhakar.
give time for this.
I think what we tried to do today is some samples of classification, the rules, and what problems you are likely to encounter, and what safeguards you have to take care to ensure that you apply the correct rate. The consequences are very, very serious. Other one is for e-rickshaws, whether you should make a tires for the e-rickshaws, you should make a presentation. We discussed about the refund provisions. We also discussed about the recent developments with regard to the COVID situations. Wherever we find that the rules or the forms are exceeding the mandate of the section, and it is acting against the interests of the assessees, apart from making a representation to the government, you may also have to think of challenging the provisions in the court of law. And most important thing is ensure compliances. This is what we wanted to talk today. I'm sorry we exceeded our time when we wanted to answer some questions. Rohit, what you can do is these questions probably you could send it across to us. I think we probably answer them because some of the questions we may not be able to answer because we need more clarity. So it is better that they send it across, and if the question can be answered straight away there, no problem. But require some more clarity on this, we'll ask them and then clarify the question. Is it fine with you?
Yeah, absolutely. That is perfectly fine with us.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, there were a few questions in case if you wanted to take that, but as you have already clarified. So what we will do, we will just send across the questions to you over the email IDs which you have provided. And what I would also request the members who have joined us today, and all the audience over there, that please note down these email IDs, and of course we will be also sharing these email IDs with you. So you can directly put your questions to Mr. Lakshmi Kumar and the team. Due to the paucity of time, the team will not be able to take more of a question. So to that way, it brings us to the conclusion of this entire session. And I would just like to thank Mr. Lakshmi Kumar and Mr. Prabhakaran and Mr. Vishwanath for making such a lovely presentation and delivering such a wonderful knowledge session which we had. And as mentioned by you, sir, Mr. Lakshmi Kumar, that in India we create a lot more problems rather than making things more simplified. And the other thing is that we also need to correct the identification, or we need to do correct identification of the duties which is payable on the product or the components of it, and which is still a big challenge for the entire industry. And that seriously calls for serious attention in this regard. And of course, we also take your point, sir, that there are challenges which certainly the industry and we as an industry association needs to take up to the government. And all those challenges which you have highlighted during your presentation, we assure you, and of course, wherever it is required, we also will come back for your help in representing those challenges in the benefit of the entire industry to the government. You also touched upon the liquidity, refund provisions, inverted duty structure, which is a key important to all the members, delay in return filing payments, and lastly, the compliance. The most important thing, the compliance, which you said. So I'm sure that the members certainly would have taken a benefit of this entire session. They would have got enlightened, and I'm confident that the association would certainly do its best in order to address all the challenges which its members are facing in terms of the GST. I thank you once again, Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran, Mr. Prabhakaran, Mr. Vishwanath, and the entire team of Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan for being here with us and enlightening us with the knowledge session today. Thank you very much. And thank you, members, for joining us today.
Thank you.
I also thank our sponsor, Mrs. Alaska, for sponsoring us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
लाइव में क्या चल रहा है? कुछ आ नहीं रहा लाइव में कुछ